Okay, I'll jump in. Can you guys hear me all right?
Will you
Yes.
be sending these to our emails, the slides, just so we can have them for review when we need?
If they just want to send them to me, and then I can make sure, Jackie, that all the TLs have them and we
Okay,
can get them
perfect.
out to you guys. Yep.
Great, thank you.
All right, and now I'll just jump into the legal definitions of human trafficking so we can build a foundation of the why we do what we do. The federal definitions of trafficking, which are codified in the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, the shorthand for this that we use is TVPA, is very much what you'll see in our own Tennessee law. So the language of TVPA, what we have on this slide, it defines labor trafficking as the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. Sex trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purposes of a commercial sex act in which the commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such an act has not attained 18 years of age. So any child under the age of 18 years induced into a commercial sex act is automatically considered to be a victim of sex trafficking, regardless of any means, indicators of force, fraud, or coercion. So we like to share a tool to analyze and illustrate individual cases by applying the action, means, purpose, AMP model. So action plus means plus purpose here equals human trafficking. And that occurs when a perpetrator, a trafficker, takes a specific action and then employs the means of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose, what the intention of the trafficker is, or their ultimate goal of compelling the victim to provide commercial sex acts or labor or services. So considering the legal definition I've just shared, we ask ourselves, how did the person get into the situation? How was this person kept in the situation? And why was the person brought into the situation? At least one element from each column must be present to establish a potential situation of human trafficking. The presence of force, fraud, or coercion indicates the victim has not consented of their own free will. Tennessee law provides means definitions, which we simplify as force, fraud, or coercion here. In sex trafficking as causing or threatening to cause physical harm to the person, physically restraining or threatening to physically restrain the person, abusing or threatening to abuse the law or legal process, knowingly destroying, concealing, removing, confiscating, or possessing any actual or purported passport or other immigration document, or any other actual or purported government identification document of the person, using blackmail or using threatening to cause financial harm, controlling a person's access to a controlled substance. The labor trafficking means definition adds the means of controlling the person's movements through threats or violence. And again, any age of 18 years to be a victim of sex trafficking, regardless of any of these indicators of force, fraud, or coercion. So we'll go to the next slide.
I'll also just add here, Michelle, a little context of why we want to offer this model is because this is what we use, not because it's necessarily what you need to use. This is a legal model in nature, but those questions there at the bottom in blue, I think are helpful questions maybe to think about when trying to understand trafficking as it relates to, especially child trafficking, as it relates to other victimizations that we might be more familiar with, physical and emotional child abuse or neglect, sexual abuse of a child. Obviously, there are some differences there when we're talking about children under 18, but I think those questions can help us see the kind of complexity of trafficking as a victimization.
Thanks. just real quick, we want to point out that not every case that you encounter will only be labor trafficking or only sex trafficking. You may encounter both at the same time, and that's something to keep in mind. And on the right here is by no means comprehensive, a comprehensive list of places you'll see trafficking indicators, but we include it to get folks kind of thinking.
Absolutely.
And that's my bit.
Yeah, these, familiar relationships, romantic relationships, but certainly other areas where children may be permitted to work in certain circumstances are going to be places that we see children, especially being vulnerable to sex and labor trafficking. Um, so just to transition a little bit into why legal services and kind of where we fit into the service provider network. There are a range of different legal services that survivors may need at different phases of their kind of recovery and healing journey. So there may be services that survivors need immediately after leaving their victimization, their trafficking experience, and there may be services that they need many, many years later. So this is kind of just a comprehensive list of different services that survivors may need at different times. So certainly there are immigration needs. Special immigrant juvenile status, what people call SIJS, is something that may be specifically applicable to youth in that kind of transitional age adult period. The T visa is a visa specifically for trafficking survivors, so it's kind of a humanitarian visa that gives survivors status that can lead to long-term status here in the States based on their experience. You may be more familiar with U visas. That's kind of a little bit broader, covers interpersonal violence more broadly and includes human trafficking. And the continued presence is a temporary status that survivors may receive while working with law enforcement. So there are a variety of different pathways that survivors can receive immigration status here in the US, which is important because we know a lot of survivors are trafficked into the US. And this especially includes children who may be trafficked by family members or kind of distant relatives. And that's how they end up here in the US. And then they, upon leaving that trafficking situation or attempting to, may not have status. We also know that there's a really high incidence of forced criminality with human trafficking. So for children and adults alike, traffickers may coerce or require survivors to commit criminal acts such as theft or facilitating, drug sales. They may acquire prostitution charges. There's a variety of different things that may happen during that kind of trafficking experience. So a huge need is for survivors is criminal defense in those situations. Like Katie said, that is something we don't do. But survivors may also be victims in criminal cases, obviously the trafficking, but there may be other co-occurring victimizations. So they may need an attorney to represent them as a victim in an ongoing criminal case to make sure that their rights are heard as a victim, to provide support with testifying, providing a victim impact statement, receiving restitution, and then also criminal record relief. So after some of that forced criminality has occurred, survivors may be left with pretty gnarly criminal records that are really impactful in trying to stabilize in the future. We know that criminal records impact housing, employment, so supporting survivors to get some of those expunged and help them move forward, which is something actually that our office can do since it's not criminal defense. There may also be civil litigation, pursuing damages for, the exploitation that has occurred. They may participate in class action lawsuits against traffickers. Certainly with labor trafficking, there may be labor law violations and civil pathways, civil remedies for survivors. Accessing public benefits, so whether that's in employment, housing, tax-related services, we know that there's a really high occurrence of traffickers damaging survivors' credit, taking out lines of credit in their name. Again, lots of ramifications for employment, housing in the future, loans, whatever that may be. And then family law is a huge area. We focus a lot on this. Survivors may need a divorce from their trafficker, but also just from abusive partners that they may have ended up with, maybe due to the vulnerabilities of the trafficking situation. custody and visitation needs, kind of everything that falls in that realm. If survivors maybe are incarcerated temporarily, then they may need support getting custody of their children again once they're out of that situation. They may have a guardian watching their children during that time. They may need help getting child support sorted out, maybe modifying the terms of the child support. And then, in more extreme circumstances, we do see that survivors are at risk of losing their parental rights and may need representation in those proceedings. Does anyone have any questions about that? I feel like that was kind of a mouthful. So if there are any of these that would be helpful to provide a little clarification on, feel free to jump in. And then this is somewhat a repeat, just a little bit more focus on some of the services that we specifically provide. As it kind of mentions here, AO is structured to be a gap filling service. So we're really not trying to duplicate services that are already available in the community. We really want to take on those cases and support clients who otherwise may not be able to access legal representation. So if legal aid is providing a service routinely and is providing it really well, then we don't want to be duplicating that. We want to be seeing how we can make services more accessible and expansive. Same thing with other partners like Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors that provides great immigration support. I'm sure there are a couple other legal providers that I'm blanking on, but we try to collaborate with those partners. And so if there are referrals that are more appropriate to be made, we'll certainly make those as well. Our office focuses a lot on family law. We find that that's a really big need. We also do civil name changes for our clients under seal to protect their kind of privacy and safety. We do victims representation. We're hoping maybe to transition a little bit more into working in the juvenile kind of criminal system and maybe doing some advocacy support for those youth. That's not something we're doing so much right now, but also expungement you see here in immigration work are some of the services that we're providing in our office. And then we kind of touched on these, but these are some of the limitations to the cases that we'll take. So we cannot provide criminal defense representation. We can support with criminal record relief. We just cannot do that defense piece, so trying to prove someone's innocence. And that's because the government already funds public defenders' offices, and so it's not a duplication of services. Our attorneys are licensed to practice in the state of Tennessee, so Michelle cannot provide advice about legal matters outside the state of Tennessee. Those would be instances in which we'd work on an appropriate referral. And then there may be certain cases where there are highly specialized areas of law, tax law, for example, where we would not be the best fit for a survivor, and we would work to find a referral for them in those instances too.
So with trying to have client-led services, part of that is having the low barrier eligibility. So as Katie mentioned, the only thing you need to be eligible for our services is that you've experienced human trafficking at some point in your life and you have a legal need. So to be eligible for our services, you can be any age, gender, have any first language, be a citizen, or be undocumented, any race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and or ability status. And then the legal need doesn't need to be directly tied to someone's exploitation. So it could be that someone wants to prosecute their trafficker, but it could also be someone was trafficked as a child and now they want to divorce from a spouse that is not their trafficker. And we take a lot of civil cases like that. We don't have any sobriety requirement. And then someone can be in and out of their trafficking situation. And this goes to not recreating the system of control they may have experienced with their traffickers. So traffickers may control many parts of someone's life, and we don't want to duplicate that, just in a different way. And then the other part of this is our advocacy. So this goes with establishing goals with clients and not for clients. So supporting clients to make their own goals and decisions. And that ties into not recreating the trafficking experience again. And then as a non-traditional law firm, we're able to kind of be more holistic and not have to speed through cases. And just kind of make decisions about cases on a client's behalf. But with providing informed options, we can kind of keep a client updated on their case and allow them to have say in the way their case goes, and then moving at a client's pace. So we don't have a certain time frame that we have to like end services with a client. So it's really nice because we can tailor how we're providing services to a client's needs. So some clients might want to opt out of advocacy and just hit their legal goals in 6 months or a year and then move on. And then some clients might want to opt into advocacy, and we're working with them for years and years on their case and their advocacy needs. And then clients choose how they identify. So we have clients that don't want to identify as a survivor or a victim, even though they've experienced trafficking, and we honor that and honor the way that they want to identify in that way. And then all our conversations with clients are covered under attorney-client privilege and are confidential. So anytime a client is communicating with any of our staff, it's covered under that privilege. And so we always get permission from the client before sharing any of their information with other providers. And then a lot of clients that come to us in the past, I think have felt that they have to share or owe something to a service provider and have to share their personal trafficking experience. And so upfront, we're telling clients, if you want to share that, like we're never asking about it, but a lot of times when I get on an intake call with a client, they just start sharing about that. And, I tell them, you can share this if you want, but in a lot of our cases, we don't need to know anything about your trafficking experience. And then for referrals, they can go to me. We don't have like a referral form, so you can email, call, or text me, pretty informal. And then the referral can come from the client or from a service provider, whatever the client prefers. And then you can send us anonymous questions about cases that you have, but the referral can include whatever the client feels comfortable sharing with at that time. So examples could be name, contact info, a brief description of the legal need, but it doesn't have to include all that. And then if you know there's trafficking, you can include that in the referral. If you don't know, we do a very non-invasive and minimal way of screening. So I'm never asking, hey, have you experienced human trafficking? We're asking kind of questions around that may lead to that answer. And I think that's all I have. So if there's any questions, you guys can feel free to give us those.
Hey,
Yeah.
Roxy, I do want to jump in just really quick for the advocates that are on the call. So the best way, if we have like a birth mom or even a youth exiting out that you feel like would be maybe a good candidate for some of these services, we're not able to make that referral just with our confidentiality policy. So the very best way to do that is going to be to keep for our advocates to have this information of like the email, text, or call Roxy with your number. And then you can sit with the client while they make that call. You can provide them the information and have them do it, but we just can't do it on their behalf, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's good to know. I didn't know that. So thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and like Roxy was mentioning, if survivors maybe don't feel comfortable just yet, maybe they do have a good relationship established with you as an advocate, and they're not so sure about reaching out to someone else, they're welcome to use an alias with us when they first reach out. That's happened before. It's not an issue until it becomes, necessary for their legal goals. So if they want to be Miley Cyrus when they call, then we can refer to them that way and try to work with them to see if we can help, how we can help. And then some of those details will become more important potentially as we assist them on their legal issue.
We're flexible.
Yeah, we try to keep our referral open this way so that survivors can contact us in the way that's best for them.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I do. So once a referral comes in, how long does it usually take for you to start working the case? What is the process like? Do you assign a specific caseworker or someone to work with that case, or how can you talk a little more about that process?
So all the referrals come to me, and I can kind of determine, I'll talk to Michelle a lot of the time about the referral, but I can kind of determine if it's a case that we could take, and then right now we're on a wait list. So it would go on our wait list, and it's really hard to have a estimated time we can get to the case. But I don't know, Michelle, what do you say? What would you say?
Our wait list is growing smaller now that we have Katie's support, but like we kind of analyze whether the case is right to go on the wait list. If it's time sensitive, we're not going to push pause on their need. We'll either see if we can help them immediately, or we'll help them find a referral out and give them the best guidance in that moment that we can. And just say, we would love to help you, but we're unable. Please, there's a time sensitivity here. Please seek another representative. Here are some numbers. Here are our thoughts. Yeah, that's sort of, I'm not able to give a wait time for a wait list because each of our cases is unique and takes a different amount of time and attention.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned at the beginning that our office in Nashville is just the four of us. So Michelle is our only attorney here in Nashville. I am our only advocate. So there is no assigning a caseworker. It just comes to us. And so, we have a limited capacity in that sense where Michelle's our only attorney actively working through cases. And because we are a gap filling service, we oftentimes take those cases that are longer in nature. So some of our custody cases are very complicated and are, require litigation that goes on a long time, which y'all understand. And so, it's not a high volume, quick turnover model. It's certainly more long-term and holistic. And so, that does mean that unfortunately we operate on a wait list. But we try to be, very cautious that folks who are on a wait list have legal services and are real folks, and it's not just a number on our wait list. So we check in with folks while they're on our wait list. We make sure that nothing's changed in their legal circumstances. And like Michelle said, we don't place cases on there that are inappropriate. It's cases that are capable of waiting. But I can also just add that Roxy does a screening if necessary, and then does intake, and then kind of the next step in terms of exactly what it looks like to transitioning to legal services is we would have a legal consultation with Michelle and me. We would kind of discuss the client's needs, get an overview of what their goals are, and then kind of strategize what their legal journey will look like. I'm present in those meetings because I want to kind of be from the beginning assessing if advocacy needs are present, and things that we'll need to work on together.
Okay, great, thank you. And then at that point, you will contact the client and let them know we are going to be working your case.
Yeah. So we'll do that legal consultation, and in that we'll discuss the engagement paperwork that we need to get started. So, we'll have a formal representation agreement. That is a contract that Michelle is representing them on their legal matter. We'll have them sign that and 2 other engagement documents, and then we'll begin working on their case from there.
And Laura, I know when I spoke with you and Michelle, you really emphasized the kind of, and y'all mentioned it here as well, just the low barrier in terms of, and I know Roxy said it as well, like there's not like a super detailed long list of hoops to jump through and questions to answer in terms of qualifying from like a trafficking perspective. And so I'm just thinking through like what types of cases that we engage with that might be able to, be a good candidate for you all. And I'm thinking about like even minor moms as they're aging out and they're not, no longer have like access to DCS, and maybe they're placed differently from their child, or even birth parents that we come in contact with that maybe have things going on. I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't have to, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't have to be this like blaring detailed, like we know for sure that X, Y, and Z happened to qualify for these services. Is that correct?
Yeah. The biggest things that we're looking for are they a survivor of trafficking? And the way that we're kind of thinking about that is, do the facts of their victimization, of their experience, even if we don't want to call it a victimization, kind of meet that model? We don't have to meet necessarily the standard. So, for example, if we're working on a T visa application, we've got to write a narrative that meets every single element and conveys that very clearly to USCIS, right? But in terms of accessing our services, it doesn't have to be quite as strict. What we do want to make sure that those elements are there, but we know that that can present really differently. So someone might not say, "Hello, I'm a survivor of trafficking." They may disclose an experience in which they had to exchange sex for drugs, right? And that there was someone who was kind of facilitating that. And even if they're not identifying as a trafficking survivor, we understand how those facts kind of fit into the model of human trafficking, and that would be sufficient. The 2 things we're really looking for is, has some kind of experience like that occurred? And is there a legal need that we can help them with? So the advocacy services that we provide are meant to be supplemental and accompany the legal services. So my role is really to support survivors through their legal journey by addressing those barriers that come up that are going to be really essential to accomplishing their legal goals. So maybe that's housing. Maybe they want custody of their children and they're not going to be able to do so if they don't have adequate housing to support them overnight. Maybe that's sobriety. Maybe their sobriety is really pivotal to regaining custody of their children. So thinking about tackling those issues so that they don't become barriers to the legal goal. So yeah, as long as someone has survived a trafficking experience and has a legal issue that we can represent them on and support them with, that's really the 2 things that we're looking for. Would any of y'all add anything to that?
A lot of times, we don't have to do the screening. The person referring the survivor to us will say, "I believe they have been trafficked," and often that might be enough.
If
And
you're
if-
not sure about if we could take a certain kind of case, you can always send me a question about an anonymous client. I'll reply. So
Yeah, Sarah, is that something with y'all's kind of programmatic rules you'd be able to do, not provide any identifying information, but say, hey, here are some of the facts of the situation. Is this something that sounds like something you could help with?
I mean, I think there's definitely a way to do that. I know that when it comes to like referrals and providing, you know, any kind of information to like an outside organization, we just ask that our advocates kind of go through their team lead and just let us kind of assist with that, just to make just like a second set of eyes, making sure like the information, you know, being provided is appropriate. But I mean, I'm sure we could definitely reach out and say, are you able to take this type of situation? So yeah, I think it's more of just kind of having that you all as like a potential resource, like in our minds for, you know, people that are falling through the cracks is what you know.
And feel free to give my information to any of your clients. I don't mind at all.
Awesome. Thank you.
Is I'm assuming you then work very closely with DCS, with FSWs. If a child has been a victim of trafficking and is in DCS custody, do you also work with their immigration attorney at DCS, or how does that work?
So truthfully, oh, Michelle, do you want to take that?
Go ahead. I think we're going to say the same thing.
Part of the reason we had connected with Sarah originally is because we are funded and can support minor victims and represent them through their legal or with their legal needs, but we do not receive a high volume at all of minor referrals. We mostly receive referrals from service providers who are working with adult survivors of sex and labor trafficking and of you know, survivors of all gender, but we don't really receive a lot of youth referrals. So I would say we're not super plugged in with DCS, which may not seem, you know, that may be unexpected, but we just aren't presently working with a ton of youth, which is something we are hoping to grow. But we do work with survivors who may be, or adult survivors who may be working with a separate immigration attorney. And so, you know, we know that immigration support is a really huge need. So if someone needs immigration support and maybe we're assisting them with something else, we definitely want to make sure they are referred to an immigration attorney. But then we also work with survivors who come to us and already have immigration representation and have another civil legal need. And we'll, you know, collaborate to the extent that's necessary or the survivor wishes.
So I'm thinking about youth, particularly I'm thinking about some undocumented youth that maybe they age out before DCS is really able to assist them with the SJIS. And so would that be a good type of candidate to like make sure they have your information? Because a lot in that situation, I think not always for sure, but there are some facts to those cases, to some of the cases I'm thinking about that would lead me to believe there's been trafficking component.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be definitely an appropriate referral. And, you know, depending on how it fits in with y'all's guidelines, that also could be a situation where, you know, it might be appropriate, you know, with the permission and involvement of the team lead, for the advocate to maybe give one of our staff a call if there is some question. If y'all feel confident that a trafficking experience has occurred, then that's one thing. But if there is some, you know, question and it's something you'd like to have our, you know, just provide some technical assistance and have one of our team members talk through of, you know, no names, no locations, no dates of birth, no identifying information, just there's a youth living with a family member. These are some of the facts that have gone on. Is this someone who'd be eligible for your services? Especially because we don't want to have that conversation with the child if it's one we could have with you all. Or if they're not eligible for services, we don't want to have to connect them to somebody else if it's not needed. So as much as we can kind of work out respecting the survivor's confidentiality and, you know, relationship with you all, I think that is definitely encouraged. And yes, we can definitely support with immigration needs for for that transitional age youth.
Yeah, and if
And I
we,
think, okay.
if they age out of SIJS opportunity, there are other pathways that we can take to support them.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, I mean, I'm thinking about some cases that, unfortunately, there is suspicion of trafficking. These are minors, and a lot of the cases that I know are actually sibling cases as well. So, just really thinking about your relationship with DCS and what our role could be there, maybe just speaking to FSWs and just everyone involved in the case, and really presenting your services to them if they're not already familiar with them, and making sure there's a referral down there. But you are able to take those cases if, obviously, I understand there's a wait list, but if you, that is something that you're able to work with, correct? I mean, collaborate with DCS and even take on maybe sibling cases. I don't know if that's something you've done in the past, but
I think
is
it's
that
something we can look at and analyze and see whether it's in their best interest for us to take it or refer it out. But definitely take a look at our ability to help. And that's something we would not put on the wait list because it feels a little bit more exigent.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. With any immigration referral, we're going to do a legal screening to assess what their options are. So, we can't just say, yes, we would. For example, if they have kind of aged out of SIJS and they're looking at a T visa, there is going to be a certain standard that they have to meet in providing a T visa narrative that's going to be, compelling to be approved. And so that may be a situation where we would do a more in-depth screening, just because it's necessary for the type of legal need, and really assess, would the facts of this situation meet the criteria necessary for a T visa application? So there would be a comprehensive legal screening of what the immigration pathways may be for that youth or young adult.
I hate that that's happening. It kills me, but so yes, please refer those cases to us, but also because they are time sensitive, just kind of reiterating, unfortunately, we couldn't take like a ton, at once, because they would have to be addressed immediately, usually. But yes, please send those our way.
And then in situations with siblings, I'm assuming you're meaning like a situation in which both siblings are victims. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
So that would be something we'd have to assess also for a conflict of interest. So we may not be able to represent both children because there could be differences in their experiences of the situation in which the facts of their victimization could conflict with one another. So that may be a situation where we may reach out to Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors, for example, and say, we've got this referral for a pair of siblings. We would be able to assist one of them. We don't think it's we think there's a conflict of interest for representing both. This is something we could refer to you all and try to make sure that both are receiving services. And that would be the case for not just siblings, but any victims who, were kind of together in their victimization.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
We really appreciate the opportunity to meet you all and share what we do.
Well, we were really thankful to have you. I'm like thinking, how can I get them to where every time like a 17 and a half, because that's one thing about us is like when the older kids come through, if they're close to aging out, a lot of times we can't serve them because by the time we get our advocates in place and everything, the case is going to close because we officially close all of our cases at 18. And there's so many of those kids where I'm like, they don't have the resources of DCS for things like SJIS and things like that at their disposal. But
Please, 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 in those cases, make sure if they are survivors of trafficking that you're referring them to us. If they are not, that you're referring them to Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors or other immigration services. It is so, I cannot emphasize enough, crucial that they are connected to services when possible, because there are two components of an SIJS application, and the first component must be completed before they turn 18. But in emergency instances, there are ways that it can be done even in a really short time frame, and that is absolutely a time-sensitive legal need, and one that if it was someone who was eligible for our services, we would prioritize despite being on a wait list, at least for that limited representation on the first part, because then that's called the predicate order. Once that is all squared away, then they have time until they turn 21 to complete the rest of the process. But losing out on a potentially viable immigration pathway for them, especially in the climate we're in right now, is not okay when they could have received a referral somewhere. So please, 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 if that's anything you take away, definitely take that away, and definitely let us be a resource for those trafficked youth.
yeah.
Yeah, I think in one case we did it the day before the person turned 18.
Oh, wow. That's
So
amazing.
it can be done when they're about so close to 18.
Well, I'm really thankful to know about you all, and the Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors is another good resource to tuck away. So thank you guys. And I will share the recording and then the slides with our advocates, and for everybody that joined today. I will get those out to you. I'll get them out. We'll get them out to everybody, but just keep that referral information handy, and just remember to kind of go through your team lead before providing any identifying information or anything like that. Well, don't provide any identifying information, but we will make the connection for sure. That's what we do. So
Yeah, I'll definitely share those slides with you, Sarah. And I also wanted to mention one slide I didn't put up, but is on there, is a list of just 3 resources that are provided by OVC, the Office for Victims of Crime, that are about child trafficking. And they kind of give 2 examples of what that may look like and how that may present in the court system. That I think would be really helpful for folks to kind of read through, almost like a case study, but are very accessible and approachable. They're meant to be materials that can be used with children as well. So there's 3 links to that at the end of the slides also, which I think might be helpful for folks to check out.
yeah, well, thank you
Very
guys
nice.
so much. Thank you for
Thank
what you do,
you.
and hopefully we'll run into each other in court in the future.
Thank you all
Thank
for
you
being
so
with
much.
me today.
Thank you
Thanks
so
so
much.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.